Okay, folks, let's call well, first of all, I've got to call the closed council meeting to order. And having called it to order, I will recess it until after the open general purposes committee and finance committee and the closed general purposes committee. So I'll call the open general purposes committee meeting to order. May I have a motion on the minutes? Any errors or omissions? All those in favor, post carried. Metro West intermunicipal business license bylaws.
Move the recommendation.
Moved and seconded. Any comments? All those in favor? Any opposed? That is carried. Then we have the Metro Vancouver comments on Surrey.
Move the recommendation.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion on that? All those in favor? Any opposed? That is carried. The UBCM Community Works Agreement.
Move the recommendation.
Moved and seconded. Counselor, okay, Counselor Day.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I'm looking at the chart on, okay, where's it here? GP 39, and it talks about the city of Richmond spending quite a bit of the $750,000 on repaving, electrical charging, LED, and solar, whereas some of the other cities spent more money on infrastructure. And I'm wondering if that has a bearing on that we only got $700,000, give or take, whereas 17 other towns and cities got between $1 million and $5.4 million. So why are we getting so much less than the other cities?
Through the chair to Councillor Day, the allocation of funding is based on a per capita amount. It's not determined by the projects that are selected by each local government for priority projects within their community.
Well, that's kind of interesting because we got, what, 230,000 people living here. Saanich, I'm sure, has less than that, and they're getting $5.4 million per year. That's on page GP 50. So why would that be?
So the per capita allocations are different for local governments within Metro Vancouver and outside of Metro Vancouver. And so the percent allocations that are distributed to the Community Works Fund for local governments within the Metro Vancouver area is 5% to the Community Works Fund. And for those local governments outside of Metro Vancouver, it is 75% to the Community Works Fund.
Okay, so how does Richmond relate to Surrey? Surrey got $1.9 million each year for 5 years.
So
And they've got the greater population.
Okay, it's that significant, the difference. Correct. Okay,
To add to what you said, I think that there's a base amount
correct.
that, like if you give a community, a really small one, too little, there's nothing they can do with it. So they set a base amount. I think that was that $60,000 figure or 75 or something like that figure. Plus, you talked about 5% going to the cities. The other 95%, that's the fund that goes to TransLink.
To the chair, the allocation for local governments within Metro Vancouver is 95% to the Metro Vancouver Regional Fund, 5% to the Community Works Fund, and 0% to the Strategic Initiatives Funds. Those are the three funds under the Canada Community Building Fund for
Right.
BC.
And the 95 goes to TransLink.
It is for proposed TransLink projects that is approved by the Metro Vancouver Regional Board, yes.
Oh, I thought there was other hands up. All right, let's see now. The motion's on the floor. All those in favor? Any opposed? That is carried. Okay. Council strategic plan, the midterm highlights. You've got your, the various reports coming right down to this, the strategic plan from 2022.
Move the recommendation.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion on that, Councillor Day?
thank you very much, and thank you for the handy-dandy little chart. As I was, excuse me, reading through all the various sections in the report on page GP 74, which is the safety section, why is there nothing in there that deals with one of our biggest problems, which is homelessness?
Through the chair to Councillor Day, homelessness or individuals experiencing homelessness is addressed in a variety of different sections throughout the report. Some examples include engagement in Section 1, a dialogue on homelessness. Another example is in Section 6, which is the conclusion of a variety of initiatives to support individuals experiencing homelessness through a UBCM grant that was awarded. So we do have them in various locations, and if council would prefer to see them in a safe and prepared community, we can move them to that section.
Okay,
All
thank
right,
you.
Councillor Heed.
Yes, quickly, these fancy reports that are done up, how are they utilized? Because people access most things online and the visuals online, but, you know, I got, in my binder, I managed to get the report all fancy and then 2 separate reports all fancied up, like,
That's what the resolution calls for it to be put online.
that's fine, but my question is regard to how much do we spend to make up these other fancy reports and how well are they utilized? Like, are we wasting money on that type of publication?
You have to be more specific than that.
Well, everyone got in their package that was mailed out 2 separately bound fancy midterm reports, highlights, and I'm thinking to myself, it's in my binder here, why do I need that also? And so my point I want to make here is, if we're doing this up, how utilized is it? Do people come to City Hall to pick up one of those? Are we wasting money doing that type of publication in such a high glossy finish?
But the resolution calls for them to be made available online.
Okay, so what was the point of going through the other stuff and sending all of that out?
Well, it's a thicker cover, but it's just the same, it's just regular paper here.
So my question is, how well is that utilized by the people of Richmond? That particular piece?
How many copies of these have you made?
Through the chair to Councillor Heed, the hard copies that are printed are for council, and should the report be endorsed by council, we do a limited print run, so they're available in the mayor and councillor's office. Otherwise, they're published on the website for the public to access.
I like the fact it's published. I will not utilize a printed copy at all. That's my point.
Councillor Nolte?
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. Thanks very much for putting this together. Just a quick comment on the document, and I have a question. This is a good summary of things we're doing in the city and everything else, but it doesn't project to the future of what we're doing. For example, I look here in a safe community safety and preparedness through, et cetera. YVR just had a simulated, I believe, airline disaster, et cetera. When's the last time the whole city took part in a disaster for an earthquake or whatever? And I'm very curious about our community safety, especially to say, are we ready? I would maintain we're not. If there was an earthquake today, we are not ready for it. And it's great that we can pat ourselves in the back. We've done this and this and this and this. But what about ready? If I said go to the first emergency shelter, I don't think there's anybody in this room could tell me where there is one, because there isn't one. So I hope we would look to put some of these things in when we're talking about our highlights and whatever, and where we're thinking where we're going to go. So anyhow, that's just a comment. I think what we got is good. We do that every year. But I think when I look through here, the safe community, we launched this, we launched that, we launched this. You know, do we have enough fire trucks? Do we have enough fire halls? Do we have enough policemen? Do we have enough first responders, et cetera? I just hit community safety as just one of the many on page. The report's well written. I'm not criticizing the report in any way. Just a comment.
Councillor Liu?
Thank you for the report. I do appreciate that they're printed up in a few copies. I will be taking these tonight to the Steveston Community Society. They appreciate looking at it. The Chamber likes looking at it. And it's even better having this little one here so that people can have a quick look for it. I appreciate the more fulsome report that you have so that people can delve deeper into it when they are interested, and also it being online. Not everyone is great going online, and it's good for those people to be able to look through it, flip through it, find something that's interesting to them and go deeper into it. So I appreciate what you've done here, and I appreciate that you're keeping us on our toes for our strategic plan. Thank you.
Councillor Galanders?
Thank you, through the chair. Thank you for this as well. I just noticed on GP 9798, I think there's a couple of awards that we've received that I don't see on here, and maybe they just don't fit the criteria for this report. So I was wondering about those, that we won the most active city in BC, right? And then also, didn't we win an arts recognition award last year as well?
Through the chair to Councillor Galanders, the Participation Most Active City Award is included in Section 6 as a highlight. I should note that this report's timeframe is November 2022 to June 2024. So if there are any awards that we have been granted past that date, it will likely be in the full term report.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so the motion's on the floor. Let's call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. Brings us to the, thank you, staff, updated energy step code and zero carbon step code, et cetera. Options for single detached and duplex homes. Come on forward and tell us about the situation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Staff would like to proceed with a brief summary presentation. This report responds to a motion received by staff on July 15th in relation to the zero carbon step code and energy step code for single detached duplex residential buildings. Staff were to provide options for consideration related to implementation timeline and clarify the role of natural gas, space heating, domestic water, hot water, and provide options for council's consideration. Staff put forward 3 options which we'll discuss momentarily and are seeking direction on those options. In general, a summary of the Community Energy Emissions Plan 2050 does it include targets to reduce GHG emissions to 50% below the 2007 levels by 2030 and reach a net zero GHG emissions by 2050. CEP 2050 also includes specific targets, including a carbon neutral building target for 2030 that all new buildings will be serviced with low carbon energy systems and built to the top performance level, which we'll describe shortly, of the BC Building Code 2027. BC Energy Code, just a brief summary of what this is. It was introduced in 2017 and is a step-by-step building efficiency strategy aimed to help the province achieve its targets for new building homes being net zero ready by 2032. For Part 9, which this report refers to, the Energy Step Code does include 5 standard performance levels, or steps as we'll see, that exceed the base building code. Each step is more efficient through examples like thicker walls, more insulation, and triple pane windows, but the ultimate goal really is to reduce the energy demand for the building. Process began with step 1 as the minimum efficiency requirement, and for reference in 2023, the minimum code requirement was adapted to step 3, and step 5, as indicated, would be the highest compliance level constructed to net zero energy ready. The zero carbon step code is also a mechanism by the province that was initiated in 2023 in an attempt to achieve the net zero GHG emissions for all new buildings in 2030. Slight change there from the 2032 number for the BC Building Code. Similarly, the zero carbon step code is a performance standard that sets out options for builders to achieve emissions from space heating systems through a stepped approach of 3 steps. The moderate step, 4 steps, but 3 are on there. Moderate carbon or emissions level 2, you'll see EL referenced several times through here. EL3 performance step and the zero carbon performance EL4, which includes electric hot water, but no natural gas equipment at that step. What is the current intentions of the province right now? Currently, their requirements that they have in place are for 20% more efficiency by 2022, which is equivalent to ESC Energy Step Code 3, with intentions to go to 40% more efficiency Energy Step Code 4 by 2027, and ultimately 80% by 2032, which is equivalent to the Energy Step Code ESC 5. As far as the zero carbon step code, the province has stated their intent to mandate zero carbon step code levels as early as 2024. We don't have anything in place as of right now. And they do state that they would have zero carbon new construction by 2030, zero carbon step code EL4, which is the highest standard. What the city is doing right now for new construction in Richmond, BC Energy Step Code was adopted in June, in force in June 2017. Increments since then for detached houses and duplexes, the 2022, 2023. Zero carbon step code, pardon me, adopted September 23rd and is now in force on October 31st of last year. Generally, the city's current approach is to incentivize the low carbon buildings. So in other words, allow a pathway for lower efficiency that require electric heating and cooling. Right now, the current step that we're in, step 5, for some buildings within the options that we'll see, natural gas is possible for space heating and hot water, but only at step 5. Staff did intend on coming with another amendment as soon as January 2025, and that would be up a higher step to is right now where natural gas is possible as well, only at the step 5. And 227 and onward, right now we have plans in the process for that. I will note that throughout all of these steps, natural gas stoves and ornamental fireplaces are permitted in all options and timelines. Summary of the proposed options staff are seeking direction on right now is to continue with the city's existing regulatory approach and delay the next step of step code requirements as discussed, which staff were intending it coming on as early as January 2025. Option 2 would be to continue with the city's approach, however delaying the next 2 steps, equaling a 3-year gap in between and a match to the general provincial timelines over the next 3 full years between each step. And the third option is to revert the city's current approach to the provincial timelines for detached and duplex homes that minimizes efficiency requirements with the building code, increase from step 3 and step 4. Ultimately, we would be going back to a step 3 approach. Through the analysis and reporting, we did accumulate some data based on costs for building affordability and home affordability. I will just caveat this, that this is the pure cost of the equipment or the material used per an average size home, which was received through getting an average of small, medium, and large homes equaling about 3,200 square feet in size. And what you can see here is the base cost for the gas-fired cooling is about $70,000 for the builder affordability. The costs incrementally go down with the electric options. And noting to the right that the total life cycle costs that would be upfronted by the builder is seems to be trending towards cost offsets for the owner-operator in due time. So that would be a reduction of costs, maintenance, and operating. Last is the hot water. As we'll see, similar table, builder affordability and homeowner. The base case, again, is the gas-fired heater, which is in yellow. And you'll see initial cost down below the heat pump water heater. So there is an additional cost there of almost double. Incremental cost from the standard gas-fired heater of 58%. But as you see to the right, the total life cycle cost and capital operating cost does seem to go down with time whereas the standard gas fire heater goes up. Step code cost estimates. This is just to give committee some reference to the costs to build per square foot. And I will also caveat this, that this does not include additional costs for land or the additional costs to build additional thicker walls, more insulation. This is purely an exercise to outline the costs from steps in increments from step 3 to step 5. And the preliminary information that we have suggests that there's a 2.7% increment currently from step 3 to achieve a step 5 building. And then just to note, the operating costs are also expected to decrease with the builder at the higher level of steps. So initial investment would be made up front, again, just for the equipment and the planning that would be recouped over time with the homeowner. This is a model just to understand a possible modeling of what each option cumulatively would look as far as overall GHG emissions in the community. As you can see, this would be for an estimate for year 2030, option 1, 265 tons of carbon equivalent per year and increasing with each option. That is the end of the presentation, and staff are available for any questions that the committee may have.
A lot of delegations here, so I'm going to ask you to keep your questions or comments really brief. Councilman Miguel.
Yeah, thanks very much. A great report, Alderman. I have 4 questions. Number 1, is it critical that we make a decision today on this? The reason I ask that is we keep referring to what the province is going to do and where they are, and they're so far behind, and we're way ahead. As of October 19th, we may not have any step codes, or in the same way, may not have Bill 44. So my question on that, and the other is, can we guarantee that BC Hydro can deliver everything that's coming along on that? And my third question to you is ask, have we consulted the building community? Everything we do is adding to affordability. Okay, it's costing. Okay, it's putting things up. So I'm not saying we don't do anything. I believe with climate change, we have to do something. We need to keep moving forward. So with those, and we can come back on that. And I'm sure the other questions will overlap. Thank you.
Yeah, through the chair to Councillor McNulty. The first question is, no, it's not imperative. The city currently has a very extensive program in place, and we'll carry forward with that program until further direction be received. The second note on that to do with BC Hydro and the province. We did note from the recent presentation from BC Hydro that they do have capacity to achieve the targets in the future.
Well, given the delegation was here, Your Worship, last 2 weeks ago, I don't think I got that feeling. I don't know about the rest of you, but okay. What about the province?
Sorry.
Are you convinced that the province is going to do what they say they're going to do up there? See, if we vote for vote option 3, we're in the hands to make sure the province can do the same. I mean, we're moving ahead, but are they coming with us?
Certainly that is a risk at this time. So the risk would be that if the council does change, if the province does change course, that we would have to update our current direction. That can't be said obviously until after the election is placed, but that is a risk that we would take based on the current and future status of the provincial government at the moment.
And input from the building community? Have we gone there yet?
Absolutely. Staff implement a number of community services and outreach programs, including our builder breakfasts. Staff remain committed to supporting the building community and do take a lot of that information in an attempt to try to support them as best the city we can with achieving some of the goals and targets the community has.
I'd like to see this integrated with what you said, and you can't answer it now, with the building standards, like triple glazed windows, like extra insulation, et cetera, and how that relates to where we are and where we're going to get the carbon print down. Just under advisement. Thank you.
Just before we go to the next speaker, you say that there's no deadline on this, but the fact is that as it is now, it's being implemented by parts of it as early as January in just a few months.
To you, Mr. Chair, that was the original plan.
Right, so
Certainly,
that's the status quo.
that is the status quo,
Okay,
correct?
so if we're going to make a change, it behooves us to make it as soon as reasonably possible to let everybody know, not January, January 1st or something.
Correct.
Okay, Councillor Day.
Yeah, thank you very much. You said that BC Hydro has capacity to supply the energy that would be needed by every build that's coming in. But then why does BC Hydro charge the builders a fee to upgrade the system? Because we've heard of anywhere from, I personally have heard from $60,000 to $1.1 million to upgrade the system.
Through the chair.
Just a minute. There you go.
Through the chair to Councillor Day, I certainly can't speak to the requirements that BC Hydro has. I'm going off the information that was presented to us a couple of weeks ago, where they've stated that they have capacity in Richmond to supply that information, or that electricity. As far as the costs, staff have looked into those costs as well, and we do note that, like everything with building, it does depend on a variety of factors, including whether or not BC Hydro has infrastructure at sites. And we do notice a correlation that if infrastructure is present and the ability to upgrade new home builds isn't as high as the $60,000 comment that was received.
What about, doesn't BC Hydro at this time import energy?
Through the chair to Councillor Day, I understand, again, through the information received from BC Hydro, that there is a portion of energy that's imported from BC Hydro, but that energy is imported when areas that the current infrastructure cannot withstand, which is in the summer. And that's what was the information received from BC Hydro at that time.
Okay, and they promised us information. I'd asked why it's 100, 200 amp, or 400 amp. There wasn't a break for 300 amp. Have we heard back from BC Hydro?
Through the chair, Councillor Day, we have heard back from BC Hydro, and that information was expected prior to this meeting. However, we were notified that it was not coming at this time.
Okay, and then my last question is, when it comes to BC Hydro, it just seems that, well, let me go to another question. When it comes to the cities, can you provide a graph that shows every single city in Metro Vancouver and where they're at in this step code continuum?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Do that before the council meeting. Councillor Heed.
Yes. Just carrying on Councillor Day's last point, and that was my question here. If you could give me a rough estimate of how many jurisdictions are where we at now, such as option 1, and how many would be at option 3? I don't need exact, just a rough estimate.
Through the chair to Councillor Heed, right now, there's approximately 5 other municipalities that are very close to the similar approach, to the approach that the city is currently on.
And option 3, that are the rest you're saying are going with what the province has dictated?
Through the chair, I'll ask Mr. Heap to answer that.
Through the chair to Councillor Heed. Prior to the update of the BC Building Code to the equivalent of Step 3 in 2023, I believe there was something like 19 municipalities in British Columbia, something like 70% of the province's population had opted into the Step Code. I don't know how many municipalities are above Step 3 for their requirements at this time.
So in essence, the majority of the people in British Columbia are consistent with what the province is doing, and that's the Step Code 3, which would be our option 3.
Through the chair to the councillor, we can get the numbers for you of how many municipalities are opting into step code levels above step 3 and the population.
Thank you.
Yeah, but I just want to clarify. The status quo is not one of these options, option 1, 2, 3, right?
That's correct.
Right now, we're set to make changes as soon as January of next year, this coming year. So if we want to stay with that, we just receive the report for information. If we want to make a change, go for option 1, 2, 3. Councillor Glanders.
Thank you, through the chair. Thank you for this. Just a bit of clarification on a couple of the last slides. So the one regarding cost increase per square foot between step 3 and step 5, it was $8 per square foot difference. And then for the GHG emissions that would result in going back to step 3, it was an increase from 265 up to 2,242. Was that per house or per year? Or on average, or per square foot, or?
So through the
Let's see the slide.
Through the chair to Councillor Glanders, I believe that what you're speaking to when you're referring to the greenhouse gas emissions, that's the comparison between options. So option 1, where we push our timelines out a year, that would result in an additional 265 tons of greenhouse gas emissions per year by the year 2030, with the idea that we're opening a wedge going out to 2030. Option 2 was 455 tons. Option 3 was 2,242 tons.
Yeah, huge difference. Yeah, so that was per year based on average building per year kind of thing.
It's the total emissions increase that come from the number of buildings built between 2025 and 2030 that have a lower level of performance.
Okay, and just one more question. So this is, what I don't understand is why, so on GP 133, option 3, if we revert, this option would have energy and GHG requirements for new detached and duplex houses relaxed. So that we go back to step 3. So why is this only about detached and duplex houses? Because people, I've heard the argument, we desperately need this housing and projects are going to go on hold because of this, but it doesn't seem to me that this has anything to do with someone who wants to build an apartment building. It only has to do with people building detached homes.
Through the chair to Councillor Glanders, that is correct. The referral from council specified single-family detached and duplex houses.
So a single family, so it would make it that they can build a mansion and not have to protect the slab from losing heat and go back to step 3, go back, even though we've been building houses this whole time, no problem.
Through the chair, that's correct. It would be a relaxation of that.
Doesn't seem to make sense to me. Okay, thanks.
Councillor Wolf.
Real quick.
Real quick.
Thank
and then
you.
we're going to go to delegations.
Your Worship, thank you. The question is, normally we get options and staff give us a recommendation. Can I interpret it as staff are not recommending an option here because you recommend the status quo?
Through the chair to Councillor Wolf, staff are seeking direction from council on the options presented based on the referral.
All right, thank you. Don't go too far. I'm sure there's going to be questions at the end. So we're going to go through, we've got 10 delegations who want to speak to us, some of them in person, some of them are online. And when it's your turn, come forward, introduce yourself. You've got 5 minutes. So the first one is Roberto Pecora.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Roberto, and I'm a director at a nonprofit organization called ZEEC, Z-E-I-C, that's focused on indirectly supporting local governments like yours, in public institutions and the province in attaining their emissions reduction goals or climate goals for 2030 and 2050. And we do this by directly supporting industry. Our big focus right now is buildings. And we have 5 well-established building decarbonization programs that support the building industry and building owners. Prior to joining this organization that I work for now, I worked in the building industry for about 20 years, construction management, project management, consulting engineering, among many other roles. Your staff has provided you with 3 options that change the City of Richmond's adoption schedule for zero carbon and energy step code. Although we'd much rather see you stay the current course, which has the requirements upgraded this January, we strongly recommend that if you have no choice but to pick from one of these 3 options, option 1, which delays the change by 1 year, specifically for detached homes and duplexes. The report in front of you includes some critical points, I'd say, about capital and operational affordability that corroborates what our extensive network of progressive, and I'd say curious home builders, energy advisors, Part 9 designers, architects are telling us, and that is that it is less expensive to install an air-to-air heat pump that provides heating and cooling than it is to install a gas-fired boiler for in-floor radiant heating, which is historically very common in Richmond, specifically the detached homes, and a heat pump for cooling. I say and a heat pump for cooling because it's something the province now requires of new homes. And by less expensive, as you can see in the report, I mean roughly half the capital cost and also half the cost over the service life of the equipment. That includes operational costs. The second reason why we recommend you stay the course is that the local building industry is successfully adopting to Richmond's zero carbon and energy step code requirements. The staff reports that hundreds and hundreds of homes have been built in Richmond that meet either step 2 or higher of the energy step code, or EL2 or higher of the zero carbon step code, or both. In the building industry, and I know this, there will always be what you could call, I guess, a hell no contingent. And they're always the most vocal. And in Richmond, this correlates with a lot of the builders that want to build in the old school kind of way, which is a slab on grade with in-floor radiant heating. For the current provincial energy efficiency requirement, which is step 3, as you all know, in-floor radiant heating is overkill. For steps 4 and 5, it's like putting a Lamborghini engine in a lawnmower. It's useless, it's expensive, and it's fading into the sunset, and a lot of the Richmond building community already knows this. The last point I want to make is this. Many of you are using the word mandatory and requirement for the province's zero carbon step code. There is no provincial minimum right now. And although the province's Clean BC Roadmap to 2030 did suggest steps in 2024, 2027, and 2030, like one of you mentioned at a previous meeting, they're just words on paper. They're just an intent, a desire, a wish, and nothing more. Here we are, case in point, at the end of 2024 with no ministerial order, no proposed legislation, nothing to suggest that they're going to institute a minimum step. And we have, as you mentioned earlier, a possibility of a change in provincial government later this month. The Zero Carbon Step Code was launched last year. The Energy Step Code was launched in late 2017, and it took the province 5.5 years to institute a minimum requirement for the Energy Step Code. And that's only after local governments, including the City of Richmond, adopted it first. So, many elected officials across the province are pointing to the province, suggesting that they're going to mandate or require a minimum. But in fact, the province is actually waiting for you to demonstrate climate leadership first. Otherwise, they'll never do it.
All right, thank you very much, sir. The next speaker is Stephanie C.
All right, thank you, Council. My name is Stephanie C. I'm a teacher in Richmond, born and raised here. I used to be a principal too at a couple of very small private schools. And I can't afford to live in my own condo, so I live in my parents' house and I rent out my condo. Today, I want to urge you to not throw away years of progress on the Zero Carbon Step Code and to keep it the way it is right now. I wanted to address some of the comments that were made at the July 15th meeting when this motion was brought forward by Councillor Hobbs. There was a lot of talk about gas versus electric, and using gas as a backup system. But a lot of that doesn't make sense to me because installing two systems is really expensive. And I looked at my parents' Fortis bills, and we have a gas furnace and a gas cooktop and a gas fireplace. I'm sorry, but I can't get my parents to switch. And retrofitting is so expensive. Even though they know it's expensive, and our house is old, drafty, big foyer, mold on the windows, right? But it was built 30 years ago, and there's outdated ideas inherent in the walls of our house, saying that airflow is good, but then I keep having to wipe condensation off the windows. And I looked at their Fortis bills, and they're paying $200 a month at least in the winter. And it looks like we might have had a $400 bill once in December 2023. I know that installing electric heat pumps from the beginning is what will save people money. And this idea of switching to another system really doesn't make sense because I looked at the bill, and that gas itself, it said at market prices, was only about 10% of my parents' bill. I calculated it was between 9 and 13%. And meanwhile, Fortis was charging us delivery charges. And I was trying to look this up. What is this? I don't know. But it's nearly 50% of the bill. It was $90 out of $200 or $100 out of $230. So I don't even know what Fortis is charging us. Also, at the July 15th meeting, people talked about wanting choice for gas, and they can still install gas stoves if they want to. It's still allowed in the zero carbon step code. And they were talking about price. They're saying it's more expensive to build low carbon. So I called up my friend who is in the construction industry. He's a project manager. He's not an expert on the zero carbon step code by any means. But he says, the trend is toward passive houses with minimal heating and cooling needs. This is achieved through better building envelopes. And this is going to save money in the long run for consumers, and it's about equal for the builders and developers. And he's not an environmentalist. I called him up and bugged him. Last of all, I just want to say that I'm on one of your city's advisory committees, and I have heard about your city staff's work on the Zero Carbon Step Code. Norm and Nicholas presented to us, and I really don't think that we should throw away years and years of hard work and consultation with builders breakfasts, and all that. I mean, what message would that give to other districts and to the other city staff in the sustainability department? And to all of the people who are here today watching. I brought a whole bunch of students so they can learn about what happens at City Council. And I think that we're all fighting. I know your job is hard, and you hear a lot of complaints. But as an educator, I also hear a lot of complaints. And when we implement new rules, it's like during the pandemic, a lot of those complaints are legitimate, but we don't throw away the new rules because those rules are often important. They keep us safe. Sometimes the Ministry of Education makes our jobs harder, yes, but we still do it because it's important. So please do not change the Zero Carbon Step Code, and keep fighting. And thank you for your hard work.
All right, thank you very much. No, Councillor Day, we're not going to have any questions. You can ask questions of staff at the end.
Thank you.
All right, we have online, I'm sorry? Glenn Ewald? There is, that's way down there. Is Glenn Ewald online?
Yes, Your Worship, I'm here.
All right, go ahead, introduce yourself. You got 5 minutes.
Excellent. Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, councillors. I'm here representing Van City Credit Union. I want to thank you for giving me some time today, and I want to apologize for not being there in person. It's my preference, but I'm a dad, and today is one of those days where I need to stick close to home. First off, I don't like to assume that everybody knows Vancity, so let me introduce us. We're the largest community credit union in Canada, over
Sir,
570,000 members.
sir, this isn't a commercial for Vancity. Just tell us what you want to tell us about the step code.
Yeah, of course. I thought maybe, Mayor, I would begin just by explaining to folks the connection that we have to the city of Richmond. You know, as you, Mayor, and I have talked about before, we've got 20,000 members in the city of Richmond. We're serving the same people. We're a member of the Richmond Chamber of Commerce. We're heavily invested in Richmond. Over the last 5 years, we've given $135,000 in community grants to local nonprofits.
Sir,
and maybe
sir,
most germane
please
to
get
this
to the point.
conversation.
Get to the point.
Yeah, Mayor, indulge me, I'm getting there right now. It's to say this, we also finance just over $500 million in residential and commercial mortgages in Richmond. And I wanted to talk today about the importance of the building codes that are connected to those mortgages and how it relates to climate action. You know, as like all financial institutions, we're paying attention to the cost of things like atmospheric rivers, droughts, fires, all of these things that are destructive and expensive. And because we're a community credit union, we're also paying close attention to the health and well-being of members. You know, as we all know, there's a human cost to things like heat domes and floods that don't show up on a balance sheet. We at Vancity made a commitment to our members based on their urging that we would cut our emissions to net zero by 2040, which is very similar to the commitment that you, Mayor and Council, have made to your constituents. So my point here is that, you know, we share the same goals, we're moving in the same direction, we're tackling the same challenges. And like the city of Richmond, the vast majority of our emissions come from buildings. Mortgages account for about just under 80% of all of the emissions that Vancity is trying to bring down. So we do our part where we offer free home consultations. We give people preferred rates on mortgages when they're looking to electrify heating and cooling, that sort of thing. These are helping us move the needle on getting our existing buildings to net zero. But we also need to think about new buildings. And that, I think, is the key point that I want to make today, what that means for the next generation of emissions. So every new home that comes up, you know, this year is going to be around in 2040 and 2050 when each of our organizations have committed to being net zero. We got to make important choices today about how we build for tomorrow. And we've been watching the city of Richmond with great admiration for its leadership. As you deliberate now what to do next on these building codes, 4 points that I would put out there for your consideration. The first is that affordability is a top priority and that electrification is the best way to keep costs down. A point that's been made by a couple of previous speakers. You know, I'll just add on to that a third of inflation in 2022 was caused by surging oil and gas costs. And perhaps more importantly, allowing new gas for home heating and hot water today means that we're going to saddle residents with very expensive retrofits when they have to replace that equipment 20 and 25 years down the line. My second point is this: health and safety need to be considered. We all know that natural gas in homes is bad for our health, but in this case, I'm talking about keeping people safe with electric equipment that can also cool during extreme heat, and we're having a lot more of those summers. The third point I want to make is a point that Roberto made a moment ago. Our region has already proved it can do fully electric construction. We have supply chains, we have skilled workers. We know we can do it because it's already happening. And the fourth point I want to emphasize is BC Hydro is making a record investment in new infrastructure, new transmission lines, new wind and solar. The province has confidence that electricity will be reliable and affordable into the future. So I wanted to come today with all of this in mind to say that we think you're on the right track with the building codes timeline. And we urge you to maintain the current timeline without considering delays. Staff have noted in their report, delays mean increase in emissions, rising energy use, making things more expensive for residents. And the bottom line is we rely on each other to do the right thing for our members and our constituents. It will be extremely difficult for either of us to meet the commitments that we've made if we delay or if we go backward. It's going to mean additional burdens for folks at a time when people are already struggling and looking to us for leadership. So we're adding our voice today to those urging you to keep up the progress you've already made and to keep moving forward. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, councillors.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Lori Parkinson. Are you online?
Yes, I am. Thank you, sir.
All right,
Okay, I'm a retired biologist who's taken a deep dive into the Energy Step Code and Zero Carbon Step Code over the last few years. Please stay with the Zero Carbon Step Code as planned, no delays. I'll tell you why. Richmond has been and is an environmental leader in many ways. Your SEEP requires new buildings to be carbon neutral by 2027. It commits to halving emissions by 2030 and being net zero by 2050. 85% of survey respondents said these changes are important. Most houses built now will still be here in 2030, and that's only 6 years away. And in 2050, that's only 26 years away. It makes sense to build low emission now for your SEEP commitments. In May 2023, the BC government announced the Zero Carbon Step Code, which controls emissions from new buildings and still allows gas stoves. Buildings built to the Zero Carbon Step Code usually have heat pumps and significantly lower energy bills than those with forced air or baseboard heat. Happily, heat pumps give built-in air conditioning. It makes sense to build right the first time, so no one has to spend $20,000 before rebates for a retrofitted heat pump, as I did. The Zero Carbon Step Code has been adopted by 29 communities, including Richmond. Many other communities are exceeding your environmental vigor here. You may not be aware of this. More than half of the 29 communities that have adopted the Zero Carbon Step Code require the lowest emission level, EL4, by the first quarter of next year. In Metro Van, 58% of the population is covered by the Zero Carbon Step Code, or like policies. So how about Richmond? EL4 is an option for your Part 9 buildings. You plan to boost your game in 2025 and require EL4 for all buildings in 2027, as promised in your SEEP. However, in your July 2024 meeting, some wobbly statements were made about 2025 and 2027 requirements. You're nervous about the cost of building to the Zero Carbon Step Code. Luckily, this concern is misplaced. BC government figures show that Part 9 buildings built to EL4 cost less than 1% more to build. All these buildings will have built-in air conditioning. You also wonder about electricity supply. BC Hydro just completed a call for power, and this new electricity, mostly from solar and wind, will be available in 2028. Electricity from wind and solar is much cheaper than electricity from hydro. Heat pumps use much less electricity than baseboard heaters. So new houses with heat pumps instead of baseboards will reduce BC Hydro's demand. Heating new houses with natural gas produces emissions, which increase extreme weather. Extreme weather makes many things, including groceries and insurance, more expensive for all of us. You've been environmental leaders. Please keep your SEEP promises, and please don't change your Zero Carbon Step Code plans. Let's build houses now for the future. Thank you.
all right, thank you very much. The next speaker is Sunil Singhal. All right, come forward, please.
Hello, thank you for the opportunity. I'm going to be more brief because I think a lot of the points have been made already. So, hello, Mayor and Council. My name is Sunil, and I'm here speaking on behalf of Stand Earth and our Richmond community members. We support communities across North America adopt building electrification policies that significantly reduce GHG emissions from buildings. I'm here to speak in favor of Council maintaining the current status of the Zero Carbon Step Code policy, and I'll briefly go over what we're seeing across the region and North America. In the past year and a half, since the Zero Carbon Step Code policy was introduced by the province, 11 communities in Metro Vancouver, including Richmond, have adopted this policy. And across BC, as mentioned, nearly triple that amount, 29 communities. Of these 29 communities, over half of them have adopted the highest level of the Zero Carbon Step Code, which is emissions level 4, by no later than the first quarter of 2025. That's only in a few months. And that's for both larger and smaller buildings. So as a quick comparison, Richmond currently requires the highest level in 2027 for larger buildings and 2025 for smaller buildings like single-family dwellings, depending on which level the developer chooses for the Energy Step Code. Communities that have gone to EL4 for new buildings this year include your neighbors like Burnaby, Port Moody, as well as Victoria, Nanaimo, and the island. If Richmond were to go backwards, it would be out of step with not only where the region and the rest of BC is headed, but also other cities across North America. So communities across the US and Canada are modernizing their building codes to reflect that heating and cooling buildings with electricity instead of polluting methane gas is way more efficient and cost effective. As an example, places like Milwaukee, Oregon, Seattle, Washington, and the Montreal metropolitan community area, which represents 82 municipalities and over half of Quebec's population and is a colder climate than Richmond and Metro Vancouver, they've moved to end gas connections for new buildings, citing affordability, safety, and health as top of mind, not to mention the climate benefits too. And when we look at the city of Richmond, buildings account for over 40% of the city's GHG emissions. And tackling buildings is one of the most cost-effective actions a municipality, such as yourselves, can take, which you already moved forward with back in October 2023. In plain terms, what we're talking about with the Zero Carbon Step Codes is requiring much more efficient mechanical equipment to heat and cool your home in new buildings, like electric heat pumps, instead of inefficient, polluting gas furnaces, which can only provide heating. As technologies advance and older ways of heating homes, like using natural gas, become obsolete, we should replace them with safer, more sustainable options like heat pumps that are readily available and provide better efficiency and cost savings. Right now, we have an opportunity to construct new buildings today that will likely be around in 2050, instead of having costly retrofits down the road. So I urge this mayor and council to continue being a leader in reducing emissions from buildings and to maintain their current Zero Carbon Step Code policy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Dr. Janet Ray. I think Dr. Ray is, there you are, is on
Yes.
Zoom. Yeah,
Can you
ahead.
hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Wonderful. It looks like thank you. My time is 5 minutes. My name is Janet Ray. I'm a physician at the Acute Medical Detox Unit in Victoria. I live in Saanich and I'm a member of CAPE, the Canadian Association of Physicians for the Environment. I'm here to advocate that Richmond Council continue to show leadership and uphold your original commitment to enacting Energy Step Code 4 or 5, or ideally adopt Zero Carbon Step Code emissions level 4 for residential buildings starting in January 2025. I'll focus on the health consequences of this decision for your constituents. Most of us can remember the heat dome we endured in 2021. Over 600 people died. The strain on frontline health workers and emergency departments was staggering. There's growing recognition that ensuring adequate cooling in homes and condos is essential public health as we head into the increasing likelihood of further heat domes. Electric heat pumps, as we've heard, are the most efficient way to provide cooling and will reduce demand for community-funded cooling shelters. I've presented information on the health benefits of Zero Carbon Step Code in many of my local communities. All have voted in favor of early adoption of level 4, which means all electric heating, hot water, and cooking. In fact, when I was speaking with a city councillor from Colwood, he was lamenting his choice of moving into a home that was completely supplied by natural gas He baked during the heat dome and wanted to retrofit an electric heat pump, but the cost was prohibitive as they didn't have the appropriate electrical infrastructure. Although gas stoves are a small fraction of overall gas use in the home, they have a disproportionately large and severe negative health impact on people because they are not automatically vented to the outside. New research from 2022 has revealed that there are increased rates of asthma in children that live in homes with gas stoves. When natural gas, which is mostly methane, combusted, it releases toxins, including nitrogen dioxide, formaldehyde, and benzene, which are all lung irritants. To quote Rob Jackson, PhD climate scientist, one of our most surprising findings was that pollutant concentrations we measured from gas stoves lead to dangerous levels of toxins for hours, even after the stoves are turned off, not just in kitchens, but in bedrooms down the hall, end quote. These toxins also worsen adult lung function, especially in those with chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. When you see the blue flame, think benzene. Benzene is a known carcinogen. Even low doses of airborne benzene raise the risk of many cancers, including lymphoma and leukemia, by damaging people's bone marrow. Exposure to benzene is also known to cause birth defects in pregnant women. It's important to note that renewable natural gas and on-demand gas is still methane and would have all the same negative health impacts for use in the home. It's my opinion that as people learn about the health harms of gas appliances, they'll no longer be selling features, but end up in the landfill. I'm a mom and a doctor, and there's no way I'd have a gas stove in my home now that I know the harm they can cause. Electric induction stoves are an alternative that are increasingly preferred by many top chefs. In fact, there was an article last year highlighting the adoption of induction stoves by South Asian commercial chefs in Vancouver. Chef Trail Trongsat at the restaurant Fat Mao Noodles is quoted, "It's fast, it's hot, it's safe," as she dunked 2 baskets of thick noodles into a rolling broth. "It boils in 3 minutes," end quote. In the same article, Miru Dalwala, co-founder of the popular Vija's restaurant, discussed putting on an induction cooking demonstration in summer 2022. Although skeptical to start, she reported being won over by the technology and has since purchased an induction stove to use in her own home. A simple definition of addiction is continued use of a substance despite it causing harm. Every day at Detox, I see people who are destroying their health with continued use of fentanyl, crystal meth, and alcohol, despite the obvious harms. I suggest that we in this room are no different if we continue to build infrastructure that locks in our dependency on fossil fuels, which are so clearly causing harm to ourselves and our planet. Climate heating is now the biggest threat to human health. As with any addiction, best time to detox is before too much damage is done. In the case of fossil fuels, best time to reduce our use would have been 50 years ago, but the second best time is now. Maintaining your original commitment to the highest level of Energy Step Code or adopting Zero Carbon Step Code EL4 is an opportunity for Richmond to reduce its dependency on fossil fuels and at the same time significantly improve the health of your citizens. I invite you to visit the CAPE websites on naturalgas.org and heatcookbreathe.ca for more information and references. Thank you for your time and your attention.
All right, thank you very much. The next speaker is Bruce Murdoch. Is Bruce there on? Okay.
Yes, I'm online. Thank you, Mayor and Council. My name is Bruce Murdoch, and I'm a home builder. I build single-family homes and small multifamily. For several years now, we've been building to minimum Energy Step Code 4 and zero carbon, even before the Zero Carbon Step Code came out. So I just want to share my experience, and I want to relate it particularly to affordability. But first of all, are these higher step codes technically feasible? To achieve these elevated step code levels, homes must be, as we've heard, all electric, and heating must be provided by heat pumps, which also give us cooling. Heat pumps are 300 to 400% efficient, and they're getting better all the time. Our homes that we build can provide all the necessary heating down to -30 if the location calls for it. So in Richmond, we're plenty able to heat homes down to any record temperatures. We also produce domestic hot water with heat pump tanks. So what are the choices? And so there's a lot of diverse ways to heat and cool a house, but in the interest of time, I just want to share how we do it. And what we do is we install ductless mini-split heat pumps. These have an outside unit and then one or more interior wall-mounted units that push conditioned air into the space. So for modest-sized homes, generally 1 unit per floor is sufficient in a new home built to Energy Step Code 4 or higher. So why do I choose this method? Well, it lowers the cost of the building. For example, a ducted gas furnace with AC and air conditioning in a modest home will cost $20,000 to $30,000, whereas a ducted heat pump is similar, maybe a bit higher, but a ductless mini split system will cost $10,000 to $12,000 less. It's roughed in quicker in a matter of hours, not days, and so it speeds up the building process. So this system ends up being providing a quiet, gentle heating and cooling, and has air filtration for better air quality as well. So after the building costs are lower for this system, what about the operating costs? Well, we've done a lot of tracking of data and monitoring, and based on real life data that we have, we're finding that mini split heat pumps will lower the heating cost by 20 to 35% over forced air gas furnaces. And the ductless mini split method is the most efficient of all options, including more efficient than a ducted heat pump or in-floor heating and cooling heat pump systems. So Energy Step Code 4, does that cost a lot more than Energy Step Code 3? Well, actually, we found not at all. We apply affordable housing design principles to all of our builds. These techniques not only lower costs, but they achieve Energy Step Code 4 very easily. There's no need for upgraded wall systems, no need for triple glazed glass to get to Step Code 4. So in short, the two key factors in achieving Step Code 4 are smart design of windows and detailed air sealing. And these often will actually lower the cost. So the two Step Code 4s, the energy and the zero carbon Step Code, they work hand in hand. So if you build to an Energy Step Code 4, you actually lower the sizing of the heating system needed. So you save money there when you go to a Step Code 4. So that actually produces a much more comfortable home, but also lower cost up front. So these step codes are easily achievable. They save thousands of dollars in building costs, and it puts considerably more money into the pockets of homeowners with lower operating costs of 20 to 35%. So I've only brought forward the highlights of how we keep the home building costs down low with these methods. There's much more that I'm willing to share. If anyone wants to contact me for more information, please contact me at the email address or phone number that I provided to the city clerk. Thanks for your time.
All right, thank you. Next speaker is Naomi Leung. Is she here? Naomi here?
Hello, Richmond City Council.
All right. Go ahead.
Hello, Richmond City Council. My name is Naomi Leung. I'm a 21-year-old resident living in the Williams and Shell Roads area, and I'm here today with my UBC Sustainability Ambassadors team. I'm currently studying and working at UBC, but I live and spend my time at home in Richmond. My heart is in Richmond, my childhood, my family. Though I didn't have the mobility to travel to council in person today, I care deeply about my community and bold climate action in the city. This weekend, I helped one of my best friends pack up their life and move back to Bangladesh. Bangladesh's global emissions are just 0.4% of the world's global emissions, but this country is extremely climate vulnerable with recent flooding and the fall of their corrupt dictator. I mentioned my friend because they taught me how much the climate emergency is both a local and a global issue. When wealthier nations like Canada, US, and the UK emit the most global greenhouse gas emissions per capita, it is our responsibility to act boldly and to use our voices. These same wealthy industrialized countries have violent histories and structures of colonization, extraction, and continual greenhouse gas emissions harming global south nations like Bangladesh. The climate crisis is already here, harming lower-income countries and lower-income racialized and Indigenous populations in Canada. The climate crisis is not a mythical, faraway problem. With heat domes killing our seniors, climate displacements from forest fires in Lytton, and extreme weather events happening in our ancestral and home countries, we are afraid and we need action now. There is no disposable peoples. only people who are deemed disposable by systems of violence such as colonialism, capitalism, and in this case, climate delay. I grew up in Richmond since I was 3 years old and have a deep care for the city. I hope you can extend the same care and investments into the infrastructure and green jobs that will carry our future generations forward. Can we count on you? I don't want Richmond's legacy to be one that steps down and slows on necessary actions that we need now. Please keep students, youth, Global South nations, and future generations in mind when considering the true cost of delaying climate action now. In all policies and practices, remember the next generations you are acting for, including your own families, children, and grandchildren. As youth, we are extremely worried about the impacts of climate change on vulnerable communities, like on my grandma and immunocompromised people living in the city of Richmond. This is why I'm strongly advocating for option 1 of the STEP Code options. As youth, we know there is no time to delay climate action any longer. This is a climate emergency and a public health crisis. I need you as city councilors to please listen to our voices as youth and not fossil fuel lobbyists. We need Richmond City Council to invest in our futures. Richmond can be a climate leader by sticking to option 1, whereas continuing to delay climate action in options 2 and 3 does not treat the climate crisis with the urgency and bold action that we need. I do not want the City of Richmond's 2030 targets and people's hard work to take climate action to be put at risk, so we're counting on you. Don't let us down. Don't choose to delay to option 3. As youth, we know how our infrastructure needs to transition away from fossil fuels such as methane gas urgently. I hope to see more of Richmond's leadership in this area of climate action and climate justice, especially in the case for equity. It's urgent and we are counting on you. Beyond this bylaw, we also need community events and engagement with youth about their climate anxiety and grief, about green job options, and ways to build climate resilient communities. Community centers should be equipped with ways to support people through extreme heat events and their climate anxiety and grief. My sustainability ambassadors that I showed you here today are working on that at UBC. We are very open to collaborating, but we also need action from leaders like you right now. I want to be hopeful about the future, and I want to believe that we can count on politicians like you.
We need climate action now.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Jackie Zhang. You're here? Okay.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. I'm Jackie Zhang. I've currently moved to Canada about 2 years, have been working and living in Richmond. I guess I can speak for a new immigrant. As we are all aware of, pollution hits our health hard, sometimes without us even realizing it. Growing up in China, I saw it firsthand: breathing problems, thyroid issues, weak immune systems. I was on medication almost daily before I moved to Richmond, Canada. Many children in China suffer from allergic rhinitis due to polluted air, which worries parents because these health problems can be lifelong. My son is one of them. He developed allergic rhinitis at age of 8 and is now receiving various treatments, including acupuncture. This, along with the desire for better education and a cleaner environment, is one of the reasons we moved to Canada, to avoid constant hospital visits. Fun fact, the Chinese government thought moving factories out of Beijing would fix pollution. Guess they didn't realize it's not just about the smoke. And Japan dumping treated nuclear waste into the ocean, saying it's harmless. Imagine if every country did that. How long would the oceans last? But hey, they got approval from the IAEA, International Atomic Energy Agency, say it should be fine, all right? Since moving to Richmond, my health has improved a lot. My allergic asthma and asthma are rare, and I barely take any pills. Cleaner air really makes a difference. But not everyone can just move. We're lucky to have clean air here, but we need to protect it for future generations. The choices we make now, cleaner energy, less carbon, will ensure that people aren't stuck with preventable health problems. As they say, the best time to act was yesterday. The second best time is now. Let's make sure we're not destined to become hospital regulars. It's high time we made that call. Thank you for your time. Thank you. That's it.
All right, thank you very much. And the last speaker is Jackie Yee.
Okay. Hi, I'm Jackie. I'm currently a student from Richmond, and my friends are scared to talk about the environment and the climate change because they're scared about the world is like turning warm, like all the stuff that's happening right now, and the for our future generation, like keep up your good work for us, like stuff like that to protect us, and you guys do. Yeah, thank you. Thanks.
All right, thank you very much. All right, we'll ask staff to come back and join us here if there's any questions of staff. And then we'll turn it over to get a resolution going. Okay, anybody? Councilor McNulty.
Yeah, just a quick question on option one. If we want to continue our regulatory approach and also increase to move to the next step, it says continue the approach and then delay. What does that mean? What are we delaying?
If you want status quo, you just move receipt of the report. There'd be no action required. It's already status quo. That's it.
So do we need a,
Option one calls for a shorter delay. Option two.
okay, but it doesn't say that. If you read what it says, I'm trying to get the actual interpretation. I want us to continue with the good work we're doing and then continue to move forward at the appropriate time. And and was reading the word literally, and it says continue and then yet delay. So I wanted that interpretation for the status now.
Go ahead.
Through the chair,
It's
Councillor.
confusing. I'm sorry.
Yes, it is.
Pardon me.
Well, let's correct it then.
Yeah, go ahead.
Through the chair to Councillor McNulty, it's correct. The referral did suggest that staff bring back options, which are laid out through those options listed. If you or council decided to stay with the status quo, then that option is not listed there, but you would just move the forward with the report and direct staff to stay with the status quo. But status quo is not listed on there.
Okay, but to accept what we've got, how does option one compare to the status quo then? How long is the delay?
It's approximately a year delay is what staff have proposed in option one.
I mean, we've heard, and it's interesting, we've heard from the young people in the delegations and also Bruce Murdoch, and I'd like to get his metrics. I think it's really critical that we have somebody in the building committee that's already done that to stay on the positive side of this. So I'm just trying to interpret option one, and it appears to me that we shouldn't be delaying. It's option one, but working towards, wherever we are. And so, anyhow, it's, we'll see what everybody else has to say.
Yeah, option one, if you want the short delay, on page GP 133, it talks about a potential delay the scheduled 2025 and 2027 changes in the requirements to at least January of the following year, et cetera. So you can
change the year?
Or you can make any other dates you want.
Yeah, okay, maybe we can come to some consensus.
But as I say, if you don't want any change at all, you just move receipt of the report. So, all right, Councillor Day.
Thank you. Sometimes I think it's good to have an example So I spoke to a developer today who is developing, actually in another city, 235 units. They got 20% into the project, so everything from the ground up is built. And then while they had a letter from BC Hydro saying they had full electrical supply when they started the project, months or years later, they announced they did not have the supply. They were 20% along the process into the project. So this particular developer paid $1.1 million to upgrade the grid system. And when we had BC Hydro here just the other day, they said, oh, that's okay because they'll get that money back from other developers. But I learned that he has gotten $180,000 that's coming soon, and the other, God knows how much, could come hopefully in the next 7 years. So does the city have a plan to deal with BC Hydro? My concern is that if that was to happen in Richmond and someone is barreling forward with their project, we're going to build maybe 100 or 200 rental units and everything's looking great and we know we have a housing crisis. What steps are in place to make sure that doesn't happen? Because it happened to a developer based out of Richmond in another city.
Through the chair to Councillor Dale, maybe I'll have an initial response and see if Mr. Heap has anything to add. Certainly, we as staff are aware of the process involved. So there is constant negotiation with either our building department or through the application process that encourage early response time to BC Hydro ahead of schedule. So there is a process where you apply and you work with them ahead of schedule, ahead of breaking ground. And those are opportunities where staff engage through the planning process to ensure that that planning has taken place. So staff already have those procedures in place. I can't speak to your specific scenario, but staff certainly do encourage most applicants to reach out to BC Hydro as one of the primary steps to ensure that they understand if the BC Hydro can offer the amount of electricity and what those costs could be so they can properly plan.
Have we seen BC Hydro initially offer, yes, in a letter, we've got the power for you, and then turn around later and say, well, the fine print says we can change our mind? Has that happened in Richmond?
Through the chair to Councillor Day, not to my recollection, perhaps Mr. Heap has something to add.
Yeah, through the chair to Councillor Day, it sounds like what we're dealing with here is a recognized problem, both by staff and by BC Hydro itself. The existing distribution extension policy is set up such that a new load on the distribution grid, if it triggers the need for a system improvement, BC Hydro will bill the first mover who creates that the additional demand, the full cost of that infrastructure improvement, which can be refunded if additional folks, start using that infrastructure within the first 5 years of its installation. It's not a great policy. We don't think so. BC Hydro doesn't think so. BC Hydro has submitted a proposed new distribution extension policy which we think substantially resolves this problem. And the City of Richmond, along with other local governments, are an intervener in that process in support of that application.
Okay, earlier a speaker said that there are 11 communities in Metro Vancouver that had adopted some of the STEP codes. Are there any in Metro Vancouver that have adopted to the STEP codes to the level of the City of Richmond?
Through the chair to Councillor Day, yes, I would say what distinguishes the City of Richmond is that we provide more options than any other municipality that I am aware of. So we have 3 compliance options for building Step 9 at the moment. Most municipalities have 1 or 2. But the short answer to your question is yes.
Well, to one level, to a level lower than us, is what you're saying. Yeah.
Okay.
Just one other thing. Can we get a chart that shows all of the cities of Metro Vancouver and where they're at in the STEP code so that we can make an informed decision?
Through the chair, absolutely.
I think we should give that direction then, to get that before council. All right, other speakers. I suggest, okay, Councillor Gillanders.
Thanks. I think that the report speaks for itself as far as the benefits of what we've done so far. On average, heat loss from these homes is 38% less than those completed before 2019. And energy used for heating, cooling, and ventilation is down by 35%, so it's more affordable for the homeowner and person living there. $8 per square foot as an additional cost for step 5 compared to step 3 is $24,000 on a 3,000 square foot house. And for that, you got the state-of-the-art, most efficient home. If we go backwards, the homes are not going to be as efficient. We're going to be selling less of a good product and cause 2,242 more tons of GHGs per year. So it just doesn't make sense to go backwards. I'm okay with the status quo. I also think that if we wanted to do option 1, let's say for possibly a year, that would increase our GHGs by 265. That's a lot more livable than 2,242. And we could review it, after the election, review it next year, or we could just say, right now, let's keep the status quo and look at it again if anything changes after the election. But if we were desperate to not have the increase in 2025, we can move option 1 and just stay where we're at. It doesn't make any sense to go backwards. We've heard from the public, nobody wants that. We've heard from the builders. I don't see anybody asking us to go backwards. It's such a huge issue. There's only one planet, so.
I have to comment that while, of course, the speakers today wanted the status quo, I've heard from regularly this is a very major change that we're suggesting. And, you want to do it once and you want to do it right. I'm just driven to the conclusion, I just think that status quo or option 1 are just, it's too much. I think we should go with option 2 for the kind of reasons that are set out on page GP 133. We can still, the city may still be able to achieve its 2030 GHG emission reduction target of 50%, providing these extended timelines are not applied to other building sectors, which they're not, and that all other SEEP measures adopted by council are fully implemented. So I'll move that motion, option 2. Other speakers, Councillor Day.
Well, the advantage of number 2 is that it would provide 3 full years between each increment. And I think the advantage of that is that maybe BC Hydro can get their act together, because they're not. That's the reality. And
don't be hasty.
Yeah. Well, I'm also concerned. I'm sitting here just looking at what we have a neck and neck election coming up, and the BC Conservatives have already said that they're going to ban natural gas, that they're going to reverse banning natural gas. So we don't know what's going to happen until October. So, I'd be okay with referring this back and getting that chart from the city regarding how, if there's any cities that are at the same level as Richmond, because while there are, 29 cities that have adopted STEP codes, I believe none of them are at this, that's in British Columbia, and there's 11 communities in Metro that have adopted one level of STEP code or another, but I don't believe any of them are at the level that Richmond is. So I think we need that information. I also, as you recall, when BC Hydro was here, I said, I understand you get 200 or 400 amp service. Why not 300? That would make a humongous difference. They said, I don't know. We'll get back to you. And staff have just said that BC Hydro let them know that it'll be another 30 days. So we're being asked to make a decision. That's a very important decision, and everybody here wants to save on, pollution and greenhouse gases, but are we making an informed decision? So while I will, reluctantly accept number 2, I think that we should refer it back and get answers to those questions.
Okay, Councillor Heed.
Yes, thank you. I have to agree with Councillor Day on this one. We've asked for additional information. We have a political election coming up where some party that may be forming government has clearly said, what they are going to do. I'd prefer to have that additional information that we're requesting available so we can make an informed decision. But I got to tell you, if we have to take an option today, it would be option 2. We all want clean air, we all want clean water, and this is what our younger generation are certainly expressing to us. And this is something that we all believe in, and I agree with Councillor Galanders that we only have one planet. We want to do the best we can for this. We want to prosper. All of us want to prosper. I've criticized inertia, but I guess I'm calling for inertia in this sense, Mayor, simply because there's so many other factors that are coming into play. If we can't table this motion for at least a month until we have some clear indication of what's going to happen here in the province, then I'd be more inclined to go with option 2.
If I can just state my thought, I mean, what you say is obviously true. Who knows what's going to be the situation a month from now? However, the way the situation is right now is that the industry has been told we're going to have these changes, some of them, as early as January. I mean, it's just not giving anybody any room to do anything other than to supposedly scramble to comply or ignore the situation, I suppose. So if we pass option 2 today, okay, so there's a sea change mid-November. I mean, if we pass option 2 today and then follow it up with council, that will at least give a little breathing room to the industry. And then if further changes are mandated from there, well, then we make them. But I just think we're putting the industry in an untenable position unless we mean what we say and the status quo is the end answer. I think that we need to give some kind of breathing room. That's my thoughts on it. Councillor Hobbs.
Thank you, and through the chair. First of all, thanks for the report, numerous reports, and thanks for the delegations coming forward. This is a complicated topic. It's quite complex with a lot of data that takes a lot of explanation. But the terminology of moving backwards or stepping back is not completely accurate in my mind. One of the main reasons for bringing this forward was that we heard a lot of concern from the community, both from local builders and from people who live in the community. And it wasn't about taking these steps towards reducing our greenhouse gases, because everybody agrees that's really important. The major concern was about the speed of the change and the increments. And so one of the points that I and others made in our previous conversations was that the province has a fairly tight timeline right now. It's only 4, 5, and 6 years from now that we're talking about their timeline. So if the city adhered to their timelines for the step codes and for the zero emission, that would probably be quite an achievement. One of my concerns, and people are talking about elections, is that whether the provincial government sticks with these guidelines. We've seen policy changes from all levels of government on things like the carbon tax, and you could see one, for instance, on the electric car purchase percentage-wise as well, because of the difficulty achieving those. So option 3 is not stepping back. It's still quite aggressive in its timeline, and I think it's more achievable for builders and for the community to do those increments. So that's the advantage of number 3. So I'd just like to say that the CEEP and the city's plan and our carbon reductions are important, and we are going to make every effort to achieve those, and I think we will, because we've done a lot of very good things and staff has put some very good projects together. But this particular issue, the point is, the province has an aggressive timeline. Richmond, as it often has tried to accelerate that and be a leader, and Richmond has been on a number of issues. For me, I don't think that we have to exceed the province's already quite aggressive timeline when it comes to this. And that's what's behind the initial motion. And I do support option 3, and I'll see what the rest of council says.
Councillor Al.
Yes, first of all, I'd like to thank all the delegations coming to speak to us today. I think we all share the same goal, that we have to protect our environment. We are all concerned about climate change and its impact on us. And I think there's no reason that we should go backward. And I think we should not abandon what we as a city has achieved so far. Now, I don't know if we can call the timeline of the provincial government as aggressive. Probably, I don't think it's really aggressive. Having said that, I think we also to have addressed a practical problem, which is, as mentioned in GP 133, we always or we constantly receive feedbacks from the building community on, the difficulties they are facing in terms of trying to achieve the goals being set by the city. I'm struggling between option 1 and 2, but I am more in favor of option 2 because it gets in a time frame. So staff are telling us that this would delay the moving forward for 3 years, and I think this would give ample time for us to review what we have achieved so far. What are the difficulties that we have to address in the near future. And I'm also encouraged by staff comments saying that the city may still be able to achieve its 2030 GHG emission reduction target of 50%. So with this option 2, the delay is not going to cause too much obstacle for us to move forward. Now, option 1 is also good, but for the reason that I think it's still hanging up in the air, without definite time frame. It can mean 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. So I'm the kind of person who would like to see a more definite plan or, some more concrete timeline so that we can count on. So it's for this reason that I'm in favor of option 2 instead of option 1.
Councillor Liu.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you to staff and thank you for everyone that came out and spoke today. I realize that this step code for new single-family and duplexes, it's just one of many ways that we're aiming to reach our goals. So stepping this particular piece, or slowing down how quickly we get builders to implement this, isn't a huge piece. It's the difference between getting an A rather than an A+ by 2030, I think, is where we're looking. If we slow it down, how quickly we implement this process, because we're still going to reach the ideal target set by the province. So even if we do go down to option 3, I think that there is value in redundancy in heating systems in people's homes. So if you've got electric and you have the option to have other ways to heat your house installed, when there is a power outage, when something else happens, you have that ability to still not freeze, have your pipes freeze, and other things like that. So I think there's value in those things happening. And I think it's worthwhile to be consistent with the rest of the province and do this in a measured way so that we're on pace with the rest of the province. It's easier for everybody else to get on board. And we also know that BC Hydro did announce that they're going to be finished all their upgrades by 2033. So they're investing $250 million in Richmond, Steveston Substation, a bunch of other things they've talked about. But their timeline is fairly far out. 2033 is the number they're giving us. So for us to be significantly ahead of that, as Councillor Day said, isn't helpful for anybody, and it's actually egregiously expensive for some people, and especially if anyone's able to take advantage of one of those multi-family homes that they're trying to do to create some affordability for their own family.
they need that extra electricity, but they're going to have to upgrade the whole grid for everybody else, and suddenly that whole plan goes out the window. So I think moving to option 3 is actually our better space to be in.
Councillor Wolf.
Thank you. I'll be having a different take than the last speakers here. I thought my head hurt before this meeting. It hurts a lot more now. I also just want to talk about the process here. I really am disappointed with the way we had this process. We had such diverse, talented delegates, and we didn't get to ask them any questions. And I somehow feel that is why the mayor ended up going ahead and making recommendations for the option that he did, because we had a lack of information in front of us. I really applaud the delegates, and I also applaud staff who brought us to where we are. And they're not the reasons we're having this discussion. We should be carrying on with the good work that was set out. It was council that asked for this potential change. And the way the report, I'll just highlight 2 flaws in the report as well. Putting an option 1, it confused people, obviously, around the table and delegates. Because option 1, you think, well, that's one of the options, but clearly there is a no option that should have been laid out in the report. And secondly, when it comes to our council's strategic plan, I value it because at the beginning of every report, it highlights which part of our strategic plan this relates to. And there was a mistake, so I didn't catch it to tell staff earlier, but on the first page of our report, on page 130, it says that this relates to 2.2. Well, that's wrong. It's actually 2.3. And I know that because I have the copy in our binder right now. And under 2.3, on our page 71, is where it talks about the zero carbon step code and the work we do. And let me just highlight 2.3, which is one of our adopted council strategic plan items, is ensure that both built and natural infrastructure support sustainable development throughout the city. So it's not the other 2.2 there. A couple other points here to make. When we adopted CEEP, Community Energy Emissions Plan 2050, and that was so that we can be carbon neutral by 2027 and so many other things, we had it presented to us that there were some really quick wins in the 8 directives of CEEP. And one of the quick wins was new builds. And this was built into that directive, which unfortunately said, oh, we can push some of the other directives off into the future because we're going to do these quick wins. And now we're potentially backpedaling or widening the goalpost, and we'll likely get builders to take the advantageous route, as we heard earlier, is referred to as the hell no contingent group. A couple more points here. We had a memo come to all of us in April 11th of this year. And in there talks about the provincial step code requirements. And it also highlights local implementation. There's a little table that staff already presented. It said what municipalities around us compare to us. And there are municipalities that have been doing better in this regard because they're not giving so many flexibility and options, which is good in its own right. But also if we truly understand why this exists, you want to get builders and our houses and the residents in those houses in the future to the highest level possible. And we already had, back in April, District of Saanich, City of Victoria, City of New Westminster, all the way to the highest end of that spectrum. This brings me to the last couple of points here. We received a lot of support, all the delegates today, all the letters we received. The only one letter that I have in my big collection was from the Chamber of Commerce saying that they wanted a delay. But then we did hear from a Van City representative who's on the Chamber of Commerce who disagreed with that. So clearly that message from the Chamber of Commerce needs to be taken maybe a little lighter. I myself have only lived in houses older than myself, a 100-year-old house, a 75, and now a 50-year-old house. I feel like it's unfortunate that I'm stuck having breathed in what I have, and I would never wish it on my kids, and I wouldn't wish it on anyone in the city if they have the chance to get a new house and not get hit with all the retrofit costs. In closing here, looking at the option that's presented to us, I'll just read one sentence that I think is the problem with option 2. And it's a paragraph kind of in the middle on page 133. It says, while the extended timeline will result in reduced average energy efficiency and increased greenhouse gas emissions per home, relative to option 1, staff have determined that, and it goes on. But that's the problem. We're choosing an option potentially that is going in the wrong direction. Thank you.
Councillor McNulty?
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. Well, first of all, thank you to the 10 delegates that came forward. You brought some very powerful information, and thank you for staff. You know, that's the problem with 9 people around the table. You have no win situation, so you've given us the information. And I believe we needed this discussion, okay? We needed this. And we're now trying to make a decision on the fly. I've heard 1, 2, and 3, okay? And we're going to have a split vote. Well, it might be like the provincial election, 1 vote wins it all. And I guess we have a commitment to the community. You know, I don't think we should be living by what BC Hydro does, because we're getting mixed messages and in every aspect of theirs, and we shouldn't be listening to the province. We should be doing a made in Richmond. This is Richmond, this is our community for what we want. And I don't like to hear this word, we're going back. There is no such thing. We have a standard through you to staff. We're at step 3, correct? Am I not right? Are we not at step 3 as our standard? Basically, everything we've done that we've seen.
Through the chair to Councilor McNulty, we're a bit higher than step 3, actually.
All right, we're higher than step 3. So that's a standard we maintain, we continue with, and we move on from there. And I think it's important forward. The fact that we've got to make a rush decision so somebody can do something January the 1st, this is too important a decision to make over the next little while without us getting our heads together, to be quite frank. We can extend the deadlines. Okay, we don't appreciate the report, no criticism. And I think we have to have our solution made in Richmond and continue on with the good work we have. I'd like to know how many applications it would affect between now and January. If it wasn't January, let's say we made it April that we were going to implement whatever. Do we know off the top of my head, or could that be found out?
Through the chair, that could be found out.
Okay, I think that's important that we find, because the decision we're making is to I hope, to maintain everything we've got and then move forward, because we're going to have to live with it for the next 50 years. Somebody's going to have to live with it. We're not going to live with it, but somebody else is going to have to live with whatever we're doing. So I think we have to make the correct decision. I don't know what the answer is. That's why I asked for clarity on option 1. It seemed to the majority of delegation even was saying maintain the status quo. I don't want to maintain the status quo. I want to keep the standard we have. Maybe it's option 4 and move forward and put in, and we will work towards whatever over the next period of time. One of the options says a full 3 years between. We may never get there. You know, there could be 3, 6, 9, whatever. So that the wording that we've got to put together, and I'm not a wordsmith, and I don't even want to try it, but I think we have to have clear, precise resolution of where we're going. And right now, I'm not sure what option I'm in, because I've heard option 1, 2, and 3. So, and on that, I'd like us to take that standard that we have now and move it forward at our pace. And it was said that we have been talking to the community builders, and I think that's important. We had a builder on there, Mr. Murdoch, who has already had it 4 with 0 carbon moving forward. He says they're feasible. They're reduced by $12,000 possibly, and it costs you more. Well, let's get those metrics and let's study them and see, is it, and don't doubt him one bit if it works for him. And then let's add our standards to it. So I'm with everybody in every department. So I'm not sure where we're going. So you've moved 1 on the floor, I believe.
Option 2.
Option 2.
That's on the floor. Okay, Councillor Galanders, then we'll go to the vote.
Okay, thank you. And I also want to thank our staff for getting us this far with being a leader and all the speakers that spoke. I agree with Councillor Wolf's comments. I'm not really sure where this council is on this because I haven't heard anybody, well, I've only heard a couple people saying that they like option 2. So I'm not sure how this vote is going to go, but I mean, I'm not entirely uncomfortable with option 2 because we'll stay where we're at, and then we've got actual deadlines for the next changes that are in line with the current provincial standards, and I think we could change those and accelerate them again if we need to. But a couple of people have said, you know, option 3 wouldn't be going backwards, and I can't understand how anybody can think that. And the report says, if option 3 is adopted, it would lead to more GHG emissions from new detached and duplex buildings for an extended period. New homes would have increased GHG emissions relative to recent builds and homes currently under construction, and would likely also be associated with lower energy performance and increased operating costs for residents. So clearly, option 3 is absolutely not anything that a leading municipality would do when the single biggest issue that we're facing as a society is our rapidly changing climate. And we have this rich country full of resources and technology and ability to afford to be leaders and to not, so that somebody building a mansion can save $24,000. That doesn't make any sense to me. We're not talking about apartment buildings. This doesn't apply to any developments that are building apartment buildings and housing that we need. This is about single-family homes. It also doesn't make any sense to continue to put into systems. It's not the future. I know places where there is no gas available and you can only put in electricity and you have heat pumps, and you know what, even just having a little generator that you can get for a couple $100 for emergency situations, you'd still be burning way less fossil fuels using that once in a while if necessary than having an entire gas furnace, which is going to be obsolete and it costs way more money down the road to upgrade it. We're absolutely on the right track. And I don't know how I'm going to vote. If I think that people aren't going to vote for option 2, and then someone's all of a sudden going to go for option 3, then I'll have wished I had gone for option 2, just so that we don't, you know, completely throw everything that we've worked for away. So I'd like to know how this is going to turn out. I guess we'll see in a few minutes.
I'll read you my crystal ball.
Yeah.
Councillor Day.
Just to wrap up, I'd like to make a motion to refer this, or to table this 18 days until the provincial election to the next meeting of council on October 21st. That will give us the ability to know whether the Conservatives are going to be in and going to wrap the whole thing anyhow, or then we can get creative, and it'll give us opportunity to get information from staff regarding the comparison to other cities. And thirdly, it'll give BC Hydro a chance to get back to us on the 300 amp service instead of 200 and 400. So I make a motion to refer this back until the next meeting on October 21st.
Well, just a minute, we're confusing ourselves with our terminology here. You want this to go to a future meeting, so surely it would be a GP meeting, not a council meeting.
Okay.
So it'd be the first, refer it back to staff.
The next GP meeting is November 4th.
Okay, and it would come back on November 4th GP. And let's see, in that time, we would find out about the other cities.
Yep.
And the election, and what else?
What was the third one?
What?
The 300 amp service that they couldn't answer.
And a reaction from Hydro, further reaction from Hydro.
Okay, that's fine.
So that's the motion you're making?
Number of houses and all the questions that were asked about staff 30.
Well, that's not part of these.
Well, if they were referring, I'd like to have that answer.
Well, then go to staff and ask for it.
All right.
So that's moved and seconded. I'm not going to support that. Normally I would. Get all the information. But we've got a deadline here of January. And if you're in this trade, or you're a tradesperson, or you're in the building business, what are you supposed to do between now and November? It'll be mid-November by the time you get an answer as to what the requirements are going to be, and it's going to be effective in January. So I think, I'm not going to support referral. I think we should just pass option 2, frankly. I'm not saying the other issues aren't pertinent, but we can find that out. We're going to have the information on the other cities before the council. We'll see if we can see if whether Hydro has any further information. And the election is going to come up pretty soon, and we can always make adjustments after that. So from my point of view, we should pass option 2 and do it now, and then be prepared to make further changes if that's required. Councillor Liu.
Thank you. For clarification, is there not a GP on October 21st in 13 days?
Would that be after the election?
Yeah, the election's on the 19th.
Okay, I don't know.
18th.
What's the date today? It's the 1st, isn't it, wouldn't it be on like the 15th or something?
The 18th is the day before the 19th.
Didn't it get pushed?
So
Got
you
something
got,
gummed up here.
isn't it,
No,
oh,
you're
isn't
right.
it
GP is on the 15th.
15th, after
then it's on
Oh, okay,
Thanksgiving?
sorry, I've got my
November 4th,
calendar all
like you
messed
said.
up for holidays.
Okay,
Okay, thank you.
okay. With that, those in favor of referring the matter? Those opposed? Okay, that it is referred as we set out with Councillor Au and the mayor opposed. Okay, that brings us to our next item, the Next Gen 911.
What's the recommendation?
My only question of either staff or Councillor Heed, do we have any choice on this?
No,
Right,
but I do have some.
just a minute. Go ahead.
No, every municipality in British Columbia Regional District has to comply with this, and I think that's what the delay is. My question that I have is, you're saying there's no cost to the municipality on this, and the reason I bring this up is whether the GIS information is available from the federal government, because they do have all of that, and if there was a cost related to the municipal taxpayer, I'd say let's start advocating to the federal government for their GIS information.
Yeah, through the chair to Councillor Heed, the process, so to reiterate, yes, this is actually is mandatory in the context that CRTC has mandated this change to upgrade our emergency services to a newer generation for 9/11. So every municipality, every region is having to go through this process. Effectively, it is bottom-up driven in the sense that each municipality has to provide a data reference or data feed of GIS data to what's known as a data aggregator. TELUS has been defined or named as the next generation 911 provider to the PSAPs, to the essentially the ECOMs of the world in the context of providing that service. There is no cost to the municipality for us to provide that data. Obviously, there is going to be staff time and maintenance of having to maintain the data to be accurate. And so in that context, there'll be effort from staff to having to make sure that the data is defined in the acceptable format. And then obviously, as we have changes in regards to civic addressing or various other elements, that will be maintaining the data. But that obviously has advantages to make sure that we have an accurate representation of our GIS data for other purposes. The cost associated to this implementation through TELUS is actually going to be recovered by TELUS through a tariff, or sorry, a charge that's coming to the direct consumer. And so it'll appear on wireline bills for home consumers where they have services as a 911 charge. The current charge that is tariffed today by TELUS is 7 cents per month on the bill. That charge will increase by 14 cents. So the new tariff will go up to 21 cents. That 14 cents is the recovery charge for this new next generation 911 service.
All right. Counselor Day.
That almost answered my question. On page GP 140, it says, TELUS will recover costs associated with delivering the NG 911 service through a fee levied against each end user of telephone services. So nobody gets out of it. Is that what you're saying?
No, nobody, sorry, through the chair to Councillor Day, no, it's not an opt-in or opt-out. No one gets out of it.
So 21 cents per month per phone.
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Counselor Liu.
Thank you, through you to staff. Thank you for this report. So the TELUS information lets you know where the person phoning is. So does the person phoning then, they're giving their, I don't know, approval to have their location known, if you will? Like I know when we installed the traffic cameras, there was a lot of concern with some people about privacy and, you know, you're on camera. Well, if you're making a 911 phone call, then your location is known, and is that information being let known to people if they're going to make 911 calls?
Through the chair to Councillor Liu, information is already currently shared with ECOM and other PSAPs in regards to aspects of a caller. Caller ID information, for example, is shared, which then may disclose the caller name, which then can also associate the civic address for that caller. So it's really not presenting anything additional or new in context of personal information that already has been put forward as part of legislation. This is considered part of a public safety process or public safety announcement or requirement rather. The enhancement with NG 911 is instead of it being relied on a PSAP having to determine the location will be provided automatically through a GPS latitude longitude coordination, which also may include elevation. So it's going to enhance the ability of a call being dispatched correctly to the right location, which ultimately may save lives.
Okay, so even elevations, you'll know where in the building the person is if they're on the 10th floor or 20th floor.
Yeah, that is the intent.
Okay, thank you.
All right, let's call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. Someone move adjournment? Okay, I'll call the Finance Committee meeting to order. We have a motion on the minutes. All those in favor, opposed, carried. Amendments to the 5-year financial plan, which has no tax impacts. Someone want to move it? Moved and seconded. Okay, Councillor Liu, did you have a comment, question?
Just a couple quick questions on this. So if I understand this correctly, we've had about $32 million of external grant funding. There's $6.8 million. Now, is this a year or over 5? This is a year in our increase in our union salaries. Is that correct?
That's correct,
Okay,
through your worship.
and then on Fin 18, it talks about $8 million increase in operating grants. So quite a bit of this money is actually external money that's paying for things. Like there are, and the union salaries they're somewhat in our ability to control, but on the other hand, they're sort of set amongst the other municipalities as well. So a little bit out of our hands as well. So all in all, there's a lot of positive news here. Thank you.
Okay, we'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. Thank you, staff. Consolidated fees bylaw. Moved and seconded. Any discussion on that? Councillor Day?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask a question of staff. On Fin 39, we have animal control regulation, and we have to buy a dog license. And it doesn't say in here that a dog that is purchased as a baby, it cannot be neutered or spayed for 12 months. Are those dogs under 12 months exempt from the fees?
Through your worship to Councillor Day, staff can look into that. I'm aware of the provision for cats having to be spayed and neutered within 6 months, but I can examine that for dogs.
Okay, because we did this before. I remember doing this about 5, 6 years ago, where it was brought to our attention that you're getting charged for a non-neutered male or unspayed female $166, but you cannot spay a 2-month-old puppy or a 3-month-old puppy. It's not possible. So I think there should be a special category for dogs that are under 12 months, should be basically either the neutered fee or no fee.
All right, if staff could take a look at that. Okay, so with that, we'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That is carried. Permissive property tax exemptions. Moved and seconded. Anything to add to your report?
Nothing to add, but I'm able to
Anybody
answer.
got any questions? All those in favor? Any opposed? That is carried. Then the city-owned corporations, the remuneration in excess of $75,000. Moved and seconded. Councillor Heed.
Yes, I'm going to make a few comments, Mayor, with respect to this. And I'm just going to read them out for everyone's edification. And I'm not asking for any answers. We should all be deeply troubled by the excessive compensation that taxpayers are providing to the CEO of the Richmond Olympic Oval Corporation for 2023. The salary of this individual is nearly on par with that of the Chief Administrative Officer responsible for overseeing all city departments. Furthermore, it exceeds the total earnings of the Director of Recreation and Sport for the entire city by $188,000. The current council has appointed a new board comprising 10 directors who are diligently working to meet their fiduciary responsibilities. I have been informed that the CEO position at the Oval will not be filled, in addition to another staff member whose compensation was $181,000. As a council, we have a duty to ensure that Richmond taxpayers receive value for their investment, and we must hold accountable those who allowed this situation to occur. Thank you.
All right, with that, we'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That is carried. Someone move adjournment? We are now adjourned. And I'll call the closed meeting to order. May I have a motion on closure, compliance, and the agenda?